Facts about jihad in Islam. Respect for human life. Civilization has for its primary basis the respect of human life. The first right that man has on civilizations is his right to live, and his first civilized duty is to let others live. This right is embodied in all religious and other codes of law. That which does not recognize this right can neither claim to be the religion nor code of law of human beings. Nonetheless, people living under its influence can hope to live peacefully. One can judge for oneself whether it would be possible for men to live together, where life has no value and there is no arrangement for its security, where there can be no peaceful mutual interaction. In the absence of the essential prerequisites, commerce, industry, and agriculture cannot be established or sustained. Hence, civilized pursuits such as earning money, making and keeping abodes, travel and tourism, and leading a meaningful life in general, would be impossible. Let us set aside the utilitarian aspect and consider only the humane aspect of the proposition. If a fellow human can take the life of another human with impunity, this would be the ultimate in heartlessness and savagery, and under such circumstances, there can be no social progress, and even maintaining any degree of humanity would be impossible. Worldly laws and codes seek to enforce value systems through threats of punishment and force. The object of a true religion, however, is to instill the respect for life and blood, which would thus be inviolable even in the absence of worldly law and the ability to enforce it. From this standpoint, the validity, correctness, and effectiveness of the Islamic teachings have no match whatsoever. The Holy Quran has sought to instill this respect and value system by a variety of means. Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5 of the Holy Quran, relating the story of the two sons of Adam, one of whom murders his brother, states, "For that cause, we decree for the children of Israel that whosoever killeth a human being other than the one guilty of manslaughter or corruption in the earth, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind, and whoso saveth the life of one, it shall be as if he had saved the life of all mankind. Our messengers came unto them of old with clear proof of Allah's sovereignty, but afterwards, lo, many of them became prodigals on earth." Al-Ma'idah 32. Allah, speaking of the qualities of the pious and righteous, states, "And those who cry not unto any other God along with Allah, nor take the life which Allah hath forbidden save in course of justice, nor commit adultery, and whoso doeth this shall pay the penalty." Al-Furqan 68. At another place, Quran states, "Say, Come, I will recite unto you that which your Lord hath made a sacred duty for you, that ye ascribe no thing as partner unto him, and that ye do good to parents, and that ye slay not your children because of penury. We provide for you and for them, and that ye draw not nigh to lewd things whether open or concealed, and that ye slay not the life which Allah hath made sacred, save in the course of justice. This he hath commanded you, in order that ye may discern." Al-An'am 151. The prime addressees of these verses were those who held human life of little value and who, in the interest of petty personal gain, would murder even their own children. For this reason the Prophet Muhammad used to always preach of the sanctity of life in the most effective manner. The books of hadith are replete with the sayings of the Prophet, stressing that shedding of innocent blood was the worst kind of sin. Some of these are quoted below. Anas bin Malik states that the Prophet once declared, "Of the graver sins the major ones are holding anything or person partner to God, killing a person, and telling lies." Ibn Umar relates the following saying of the Prophet: "A believer remains acceptable in the eyes of his religion till he sheds human blood without due cause." A hadith from Nisai quotes the Prophet as saying, "The first thing that a man will be questioned about on the day of judgment will be the account of his prayers, and the first thing to be settled between men will be claims of blood." In reply to a question as to what is the gravest of sins, the Prophet stated that it was holding someone equal to Allah. The next in gravity is the murder of one's own children, for fear that one may have to share one's food with them, and the next was fornication with the neighbor's wife. Moral impact of the Islamic teachings on the world. Respect for life that Islam propagates are not the result of the thinking of any philosopher or teacher of ethics, that its effects would remain confined within the covers of books or to universities. It is the teaching of Allah, and each word of it became the fundamental part of every Muslim's faith. The effect of this teaching on the savage and fearsome Arabs was such that they were transformed into a peace-loving people who had the greatest respect for human life. This, to the extent that after the passage of only a quarter of a century, a woman could travel alone in their land from Qadisiyah to Sana'a in complete safety, where earlier, big and well-guarded caravans could not travel without fear. Then, when half of the civilized world came under the sway of Islamic law, like many other ills and wanton practices, disrespect for human life was also corrected. Today the status that respect of life is given, in the accepted and respected laws of this civilized world, is the magnificent result of this great Islamic revolution. On the eve of the revelation of the Holy Quran, life had little value. The world is well aware of the Arab savagery and disregard for life, but even among those nations, which were considered highly civilized and cultured, with established centers of learning and wisdom, the conditions were not much better. The stories of the events in the Roman Colosseums are well known. Multitudes of men became victims of gladiatory for the entertainment of the gentry, savage killings of men by beasts, having them slaughtered like animals, arranging spectacles of men burning to death just for the entertainment of friends, were neither uncommon nor looked upon with disdain. In many nations of Europe and Asia, torturing and killing prisoners of wars as well as other prisoners and slaves, by different means was a common practice of that time. The great men of learning and philosophy of enlightened Rome and Greece were proponents of such human killings under various circumstances. Even philosophers of the eminence of Aristotle and Plato condoned the removal of the female womb. Hence, premature abortion of pregnancy was not considered illegal or immoral. The father had right to a son's life, and the Roman lawmakers were proud of this legal and unlimited parental potent. Suicide was not a wrongful act in the eyes of the rulers and Stoics. It was rather appreciated and sometimes performed in gatherings specially arranged for the purpose. Even people of the wisdom of Aristotle did not consider it worthy of any disdain. For a husband, killing his wife was of the stature of killing a pet animal. In India, among Hindus, the custom of human sacrifice was common, to the extent that cremation of the living widow on the dead husband's funeral pyre was a legal act, even stressed upon and highly recommended by their religion. It could be said that widows volunteered for the sacrifice, but the fact is that there were so many social pressures on her that she was well nigh forced into the suicide. The life of one from the Shuddha caste was of no great moment, only for the reason that the poor chap was born from the feet of the god, Brahma, Sikh. His blood was not inviolate for one of Brahmin caste. If he, the Shuddha, happened to hear the recitation of the holy Vedas, killing him by pouring molten lead in his ears was not only permissible but obligatory. Jal Pradha was a popular Hindu custom, according to which the parents cast their firstborn into the river Ganges. The parents used to consider this a sublime act. In these dark times, Islam gave birth to the concept of the sanctity of life. Shedding of human blood, per its concept, was prohibited unless absolutely justifiable. There was strength in this, the strength of being in conformity with nature and unlike contradiction of it, like Parama Dharma and Ahimsa. That was the reason for its acceptability and rapid spread to every corner of the globe. It apprised man of the true value of his life. Whether any nation accepted its call or not, it had the quality that none could withstand its effects, at least to some extent, on its socio-cultural life. No fair and unbiased scholar will deny the effect of this call on establishing the sanctity of life was paramount and greater than the effects of the Sermon of the Mount or of Hindu Parama Dharma. Rightful killing. Consider carefully, where Quran teaches us of the sanctity of life, it does not merely say that life cannot be violated under any circumstance. If this alone had been stated, the concept could have been considered defective. No code of law of the world is bereft of the proviso for enforcement. Human nature dislikes restraints. It is not possible that man would always be disciplined and law-abiding. It is in man's nature that he is capable of doing both good and bad. Where it is possible that he can be disciplined, he is also capable of the grossest indiscipline. Therefore, to control the unruly and undisciplined aspect of his nature and compel him towards discipline, it is necessary to have laws and rules, which are explicit in specifying the punishment for their violation and for disregard of prohibitions. Only stating, "Do not create strife in the land after it has been set right," or "Do not shed blood that has been declared sacred," is clearly not enough. Man has to be told what his punishment would be if he is found guilty of the major sins of spreading strife or of bloodshed. Such oversights are possible in man-made laws, but they are not. Where divinity is the author, divine law is explicit on the inviolability of life, lest it be forfeit per its legal injunctions. The inviolability is relevant only within lawful bounds. Whenever man crosses these bounds or limits, spreads strife, or when he threatens others, lives without warrant, the sacredness of a man's life turns into a burden for society and he loses his right to live. In his death alone is the life of humanity. Taking of a human life is indeed a big evil, but worse is spreading strife and disorder, so states the Quran. When a person is guilty of this bigger crime, it is far better for the world that his ability to do so again is curbed. The Holy Quran states, "You have been ordered that the death of the murdered be avenged." Thus the systematic discrimination between high and low status among men, imposed by nations gone astray, has been eliminated. The Holy Quran states, by virtue of their being human, all men are equal. Therefore, it is not possible that the rich may take the life of the poor or the master of his slave and go scot-free. By virtue of being human, they are all equal. Killing can only be avenged by taking the guilty one's life, whether he be rich or poor. In order to remove the element of horror from this killing for punishment, the Holy Quran states, O you wise people, do not consider this punishment, qisas, the death of a man, but a lease on life has been given to society, by removing a dangerous ulcer from its body. Prophet Muhammad explained this philosophy of lease on life, by virtue of a death by qisas. He stated in this regard, help thy brother, whether he be oppressed or the oppressor. People asked him as to how indeed the oppressor could be helped. He replied, by holding his hand and preventing him from committing a foul act. In fact, any tribulation caused to an oppressor is but a kindness to him and indeed is an aid to the oppressor. This is why instructions regarding establishment of the bounds of Allah are strict. The act of establishing Allah's bounds is greater than the prosperity brought by 40 days of rain. The prosperity brought by rain is that it lends fertility to the soil, which increases the produce of the land, which brings prosperity to the dwellers. The prosperity due to the establishment of Allah's bounds is that strife, disorder and oppression have their roots severed, and His creations can live in peace and harmony, the essentials for progress of civilization. Rightful killing versus wrongful killing. The restrictions on shedding blood of the innocents are severe and equally strict are the instructions in Islam to shed blood in the rightful cause. Thus Islam points to the middle path, the path between oppression and docile tolerance. On one side is the transgressor who holds human life of little value and considers it right to shed human blood to satisfy his lowly desires. On the other side is the misguided group that holds the mistaken viewpoint that life is sacred and inviolable, whatever the circumstance may be. The Islamic law negates both these wrong schools of thought. It holds that human life is neither inviolable like the honor of the Holy Kaaba or that of one's mother or one's sister, nor is it so valueless that it may be sacrificed to satisfy one's ego or emotions. It teaches us that the human life is not so cheap that one may enjoy the spectacle of seeing it writhe in pain in dungeons, ending it painfully by burning or torture, or in ending the life if found obstructing one's desires or to satisfy one's base and carnal desires. Life is not for sacrifice on the altar, on some wrong pretext for carrying out some false traditions. Definitely, shedding blood for such unholy and filthy purposes is not only intolerable, but is most emphatically prohibited. Islam also teaches us that there is something of more value than human life, and that is the cause of righteousness. When shedding blood is the requirement of the cause, it is not only correct to do so, but is obligatory. To refrain from shedding blood under such circumstances is prohibited. Until one maintains the sanctity of truth and justice, one's life remains sacred, but when one insists on violation of bounds, one makes one's own life valueless, rather a burden for society. Unavoidable killing. Although rightfully depriving someone of his life, as punishment for wrongful killing, is also bloodshed, it is unavoidable. Without this, peace cannot be established in the world, strife and violence cannot be uprooted, pious cannot be protected from the evils of the impious, rightful cannot get their rights, freedom of conscience is not possible and transgressors cannot be kept from transgressing. Hence, Allah's creation cannot enjoy any degree of physical, mental, and spiritual peace. If Islam is accused of this kind of bloodshed, it has no compunctions about accepting it. But the question is, which society is innocent of such rightful and necessary bloodshed? Buddhism's ahimsa holds it wrong, but it was forced to make a difference between spirituality and necessity, ultimately assuring salvation, nirvana, for a little group. The rest of the Buddhists were provided skeletal spiritual instructions and given leave to follow grahas dharam, the law of necessity, for the pursuit of such occupations as politics, criminology and war. Similarly, Christianity, despite its professed and total abhorrence for war and bloodshed, had to ultimately accept its necessity. When Roman atrocities became unbearable, the Christians occupied the throne and subjected the empire to such bloodshed, which far exceeded the limits of unavoidable bloodshed. In the Hindu religion, its authors also suggested the philosophy of ahimsa and parmudaram, which totally forbid bloodshed of any creation of God and proclaimed taking of human life a major sin. However, Manu, a contemporary man of law and religion, was asked for a ruling as to what was to be done if someone made advances towards their women or plundered their belongings or insulted their religion. He replied that such a person, no matter whether he be a guru or a scholar or of the Brahmin caste or an old man, should indeed be put to death. The objective of this discussion is not to argue the necessity of unavoidable killings by comparison of the relevant aspects of various religions. That is a different subject. It will be discussed later, where it will be seen that those religions that considered war as heinous were practically unable to avoid it. Here our aim is only to demonstrate that all nations, no matter what heights their philosophies and ideologies may have achieved, must ultimately rely on practical solutions to address their worldly problems, and that the world compels them to combat reality with workable practicality. It was not God's intention that the world be given such pleasing and delectable regulations as can be found in Ahimsa, or the divinity of such revelations would have dumbfounded the world's intellect. The intent was not philosophical exhibitionism, rather he intended to give his creatures a correct, clear, and precise code of conduct, following which would put their world, and hereafter, in good order. Despite the consideration that without the provision of the clause, without just cause, merely instructing man, "Thou shalt not kill," would not have sufficed. And despite seeing that man deserved the chastisement, "Why do you preach that which you do not practice?" It was not possible that the divine, the unfaltering, would continue accepting that man continue professing Ahimsa and Parmudaram, and that he would at the same time condone the wielding of the sword. It was in his wisdom that the Lord instructed man not only to hold life sacred, but also prescribed taking of it as punishment for causing death. In this way, he rationalized the use of strength, which could hence be utilized effectively for furthering the concept of sacredness of life. Collective evil. Individuals and also groups or nations are liable to the law of punishment for death. Just as man individually can get unruly, so can the groups or nations. Like individuals, groups or nations can succumb to temptation and greed and go beyond all bounds to satisfy themselves. Individuals can be kept under control and their desires for trespass under check, either by punitive or by preventive means. Similarly, for curbing a group's or a nation's tendency for evil, war becomes unavoidable. Except the manifest enormity of effects, there is no difference between individual and collective evil. The effects of individual evil and mischief are confined within a particular restricted circle. Only a limited number of people in its sphere of influence are affected adversely, and a little bloodying of the soil can cure the problem. Strife caused by a group, however, can have effects that are unlimited and catastrophic. Because of it, for many people, existence can become a burden. Nations in their entirety have their lives jeopardized. Even the entire system and organization of civilization can face tumult and turmoil. The end of such strife cannot be effected without the flow of streams of blood. When nations stoop to arrogance and indiscipline, the unleashed strife adopts many forms. Many satanic powers become part of the upheaval and thousands of calamities arise as the logical result. Some such nations have greed as their factor of motivation, and for this reason they indulge in loot and plunder of weaker and poorer nations. The trade of overpowered nation is usurped. Its industry is destroyed. On one pretext or the other, the aggressors, by virtue of their military might alone, continue to fill their coffers with the hard-earned wealth of the weaker. All this while the object of this vile attention, the rightful owners, the already impoverished, diseased and famine-stricken nations continue having their problems further aggravated. Success often goes to the heads of the conquerors, fanning their egocentricity to the extent that some do not desist even from laying claims to godhead. The poorer people's rights are easily violated. The existing justice, law and value systems are trampled down. The standard of cruelty and wickedness is raised. The pious, God-fearing and noble of the land are crushed, and the vile and wicked scum of the earth are raised in their place. The influence on the conquered nations is such that in time, the springs of virtue, nobility and charity dry up, and in their place ensue gutters of distrust, vileness, cruelty, immodesty, lawlessness, and other equally heinous attributes of society. Some such aggressors are propelled by their deep and unholy compulsion for conquest for the sake of conquest, and for subjugating humanity or a big part of it, to their overlordship. Then, such a person or nation starts subjugating all weak and defenseless nations, depriving them of their freedom, and laying waste their lives and lands to satisfy the thirst for power. The world soon becomes strife-stricken, and humans are effectively forced into slavery of other humans. That in time becomes the root cause of social upheaval. In certain cases, there is the assumed perception that conquerors' beliefs can also be forced on the conquered nations. Religious freedom becomes a fatality, and the desire to follow their own religion rather than that of the conqueror becomes worthy of punishment. The situation definitely is calamitous then. War, social and moral obligation. Under the above stated circumstances, war is not merely allowable, it becomes a moral imperative. At such a time the biggest service to humanity is to redden the earth with the blood of these cruel aggressors. This is to free the weak and the oppressed from the satanic usurpers of land and to protect them from the strife and unbearable oppression being meted down to them. Such usurpers, who are none other than the disciples of Satan, unleash unspeakable moral, spiritual and physical hardship on the children of Adam. They are indeed the foremost enemies of humanity. They deserve no sympathy. The true kindness to them would be to eliminate their mischief and their capability thereof. They themselves forfeit their right to exist, as do those who help their mischievous cause. They are in fact that part of the body which is deeply infected, and the vile affluence gathered in that part is such that there is a likelihood of it fatally infecting the rest of the body. Under these circumstances, it is necessary that the defective and infected part of the body be surgically removed and cast away. It is possible that there is an intellectual or a scholar who even considers the elimination of such people or groups a sin and is deeply horrified at the prospect of their bloodshed. Such a scholar, however, cannot cause a corrective change in the society. Such a person can exist in the jungles or on mountains, as a hermit, in the pursuit of mental peace or in intellectual concentration, but he can never succeed in removing evil and cruelty from the world, nor will he be a participant in promoting world peace. Such a person may succeed in forming a group of like-minded people, who along with others will be willing to share the torments unleashed on them. But he cannot hope to establish a group of determined humans who would be capable of uprooting evil and persecution from this world, and reaching for God's creations, a place where peace and harmony flourish and men are unencumbered in pursuit of the higher aims of humanity. Practical ethics, the aim of which is the establishment of the correct order of things in civilization, is that branch of philosophy in which one may not indulge in pursuit of pleasurable mental and intellectual sensuality. The object of medicine is not to seek satisfaction in the pursuit itself, rather, it is to actually find remedies for physical maladies, whether the remedy is bitter or sweet. Similarly, the goal of ethics is not to seek sensual pleasures, but to reform the world, be it through harsh or lenient measures. A true ethical reformer can neither rely solely on the sword nor on the pen alone to reform the society. Most solutions need the involvement of both. Until the time that preaching and prohibitions are sufficient to hold in check an unruly and boisterous congregation of men and to keep them within bounds of ethics and humanity, the use of the sword is not merely impermissible, it is prohibited. However, when the mischief and transgression become so deep-rooted and rampant that no counseling and advice will have an effect, using force against them may be the only option. If they refuse to refrain from violating others' rights, attacking others' character and self-respect, or from intruding into others' moral, spiritual, or physical life, then all rational members of the society must stop the transgressors by force. They must continue this struggle unabated, until such time that rights of the Lord's creation are restored. The wisdom of war. Keeping in consideration the wisdom and necessity of war, as seen in the foregoing, Allah, the all-wise and all-knowing, states, "Had it not been for Allah's repelling some men by means of others, cloisters and churches and oratories and mosques, wherein the name of Allah is oft mentioned, would assuredly have been pulled down." Al-Hajj 40. In this blessed verse of Quran, not only mosques are mentioned, but also churches, cloisters, and oratories are mentioned. The word used in the verse for church is soaim, which envelops both the Christian church and the Jewish synagogue. After using these multifaceted words, he has chosen using the word salat, which covers all forms of prayer to the Lord. The word masajid, mosques, has been used last of all. The verse states that if God had not chosen eradication of the evil at the hands of the just, from time to time, even places of worship that cannot be regarded as a place of danger by any, would not have been safe. The verse points out that the worst form of aggression and conflict is one in which even places of worship are not safe. In a very subtle way, he also warns man of the divine plan, according to which, if a group becomes capable of such wanton behavior, he will make another group a means of bringing it to task. The wisdom and necessity of war have also been illustrated in the verse relating the death of Goliath at the hands of Prophet Dawood. If Allah had not repelled some men by others, the earth would have been corrupted. But Allah is a Lord of kindness to His creatures. Al-Baqarah 251. At another place, the Quran, speaking of conflict between nations and mutual enmity, states, "As often as they light a fire for war, Allah extinguisheth it. Their effort is for corruption in the land, and Allah loveth not the corrupters." Al-Ma'idah 65. Jihad in the way of Allah. This is the conflict with strife and turmoil, greed and avarice, malevolence and enmity, discrimination and prejudice, for containing which Allah has instructed the good and the faithful to raise their swords. Sanction is given unto those who fight because they have been wronged, and Allah is indeed able to give them victory. those have been driven from their homes unjustly, only because they said our Lord is Allah. Al-Hajj 39-40. This is the first of the verses of Quran on this subject. In this verse, those against whom war has been made permissible are not those who have very fertile lands or are highly successful in commerce or those who have a different creed, rather, these are those whose crime of cruelty and of committing atrocities is clearly obvious. They drive innocent people from their homes and are so discriminatory that they subject the oppressed to hardships and pain, just because they, the oppressed, say their Lord is Allah. Against such people, war was not ordered only for defensive purposes, but also in aid of and in defense of the weak and defenseless, who are suffering such atrocities. How should ye not fight for the cause of Allah and of the feeble among men and of the women and children who are crying, Our Lord, bring us forth from out this town of which the people are oppressors. Oh, give from thy presence a protecting friend. Oh, give us from thy presence a protector. Al-Nasr 75. A war waged in self-defense or for the protection of the weak, helpless and oppressed, Allah has declared, is not in the cause of his subjects, but in his own cause. It is not for achieving any mortal aim, but to elicit his favor. It has been commanded that such a war should continue till the oppression and aggression ends. In this context the Holy Quran states, continue fighting till the mischief continues, till war itself surrenders. There is no sign of conflict left, and there is no need left for combat. It has also been stated that if such a fight is abandoned, considering it an unnecessary bloodshed or in consideration of own losses of life and material, it can have devastating results on the society, defining the bounds of right and wrong causes of war. Allah did not stop at instructing man on the wisdom and necessity of war, but went on further to elaborate the instructions as follows. Those who believe do battle for the cause of Allah, and those who disbelieve do battle for the cause of idols, in the cause of oppression and arrogance. So fight the minions of the devil. Lo, the devil's strategy is weak. Al-Nasr 76. This is the deciding factor, which has established the bounds of the rightful and wrong causes. Those who fight in the cause of oppression and cruelty are devil's friends. Their aims are to deprive the rightful of their rights and the owners of their possessions and to create difficulties for the believers. Indeed, fight for a wrong cause. Allah has nothing to do with it, and it is not for the people of faith to participate in such fights. However, those who fight such tyrants in the cause of the oppressed, with intent to rid the world of tyranny and turbulence and to establish law and order in its place, their intent is to suppress the tyrants and provide for the Lord's creations an environment of peace, tranquility and opportunity to strive for the higher aims of humanity. These are indeed mujahids. They fight in the way of Allah. They do not aid the oppressed, but indeed, Allah himself does. Allah's promise of success is undoubtedly for such people. The prudence and excellence of jihad. Pages after pages of Holy Quran are filled on the subject of prudence and excellence of jihad in the cause of Allah. To stress on its excellence and prudence, the Quran says, O ye who believe, shall I show you a commerce that will save you from painful doom? Ye should believe in Allah and his messenger, and strive, do jihad, for the cause of Allah with your wealth and lives. If you did but know. Al-Saf 10-11. Of those who take part in such jihad, the Quran states, Lo, Allah loveth those who battle for his cause in ranks, as if they were a solid structure. Al-Saf 4. The high station and stature accorded to jihad has been so acknowledged in the Holy Quran. Count ye the slaking a pilgrim's thirst and attendance of the inviolable place of worship is equal to the worth of him who believeth in Allah and the last day, and striveth, does jihad, in the way of Allah. They are not equal in the sight of Allah. Allah getteth not wrong-doing folk. Those who believe and have left their homes and striven with their wealth and their lives in Allah's way are of much greater worth in Allah's sight. These are they who are triumphant. Al-Tawbah 19-20. This is the war in the cause of the right. A night's wakefulness in such cause has been declared better than 1,000 nights of prayer and worship at home. Hellfire has been forbidden to touch the eye that so keeps awake, and the feet have been declared safe from the hellfire, which in the cause gets soiled with dust. Along with this, those who choose to ignore the call and, although feeling uneasy about it, prefer the comfort of their homes, have been very severely chastised and warned. Say, if your fathers, and your sons, and your brethren, and your wives, and your tribe, and the wealth ye have accumulated, and the merchandise for which ye fear that there will be no sale, and the dwellings ye desire are dearer to you than Allah and his messenger, and striving, jihad, in his way, then wait till Allah bringeth his command to pass. Allah getteth not the wrongdoing folk. Al-Tawbah 64. Reasons for the excellence of jihad. Consider why jihad has been awarded such a high status and praise. why have those taking part in jihad been told time and again that their status is indeed very high? Why have those who avoid it and stay home been so severely chastened and warned? If you seek the answer to these questions, please go through the verses that proclaim its high status and recognize the triumph of those who participate in it and the foulness of those who run away from it. In these verses, nowhere has success been shown to mean the amassing of wealth and treasure or the establishment of empires and sovereignty. Unlike the pronouncement according to Hindu belief of Krishna to Arjun, that if he succeeds in the grand war of Mahabharata he would gain the overlordship of the world. Gita 37:6. The Holy Quran has nowhere enticed the Muslims with gains of treasures or sovereignty. Only the hope for Allah's approval, forgiveness, and blessing has been kindled. Among the Arabs, the responsibility for the provisioning of water for pilgrims performing Hajj or Umrah was considered a matter of great influence, importance and pride. It was also a source of great income. Islam, however, decreed a higher status for those who leave their abodes in order to fight in Allah's cause. Apart from this, there is no mention of any reward for such people. At another place there is mention of trade in connection with jihad. This may lead the reader into thinking that there might be a consideration of worldly wealth. On a little study, it will become clear that trade in this context is the expending of wealth and even life for gaining Allah's favor. Even though victory could have meant gathering of much wealth, increase in commerce, rights to the magnificent palaces of the conquered, and much prestige, people have not been enticed into jihad by promises of such gains. Rather, those people have been scolded who, out of consideration of their family, trade, fortune and luxury of their homes, chose to stay away from jihad. The question is, that if the object of this bloodshed is not the acquisition of worldly gains and sovereignty, what does Allah intend for His creatures to gain from it? Why does He make promises of such high favor to those who participate in it? Why indeed has He granted such favor to even the feet, dust-soiled, in its pursuance? What is so triumphant in this dry and unsavory struggle for those who participate in it? The answer can be found in the part of the Holy Quran, which states that Allah does not want that mischief and oppression should spread on His earth, that His creatures are troubled and exterminated without due cause, that the strong swallow up the weak, that people's peace and tranquility are usurped, their moral, spiritual and material lives are destroyed. He does not tolerate that the world becomes a home of misdeeds, cruelty, murder and oppression. He does not want His creatures to be in bondage of others, stripped of all human respect. Can any be more deserving of Allah's clemency than a group which sets out in the way of Allah, without thought of recompense and without consideration and temptation of any material gain, just for the purpose of clearing the world of mischief, cruelty and oppression and to establish in its place justice and the rule of law? Who indeed is more deserving of His favor? Then who can say that he has not achieved, or that he is not triumphant? Indeed, for such triumph, even death on the battlefield would be like the blissful embrace of an ardent lover. This is the very reason for the high status accorded to jihad, just after Iman bi Allah, faith in Allah. On careful consideration, one will come to the conclusion that this is the very spirit behind all virtuous deeds. Human desire, that he will not tolerate evil in any condition, and for establishing virtue, he will sacrifice anything, are the noblest of his attributes, and his success in life is dependent on this spirit. If one tolerates evil in respect of others, this moral weakness will ultimately compel him to accept ill against himself, and when this toleration becomes a part of his psyche, he descends to the level that Allah terms as a scourge. In this state, man does not accept only physical bondage, but is actually a psychological slave as well. He becomes incapable of distinguishing the right from wrong and good from evil. He falls to such depth of inhumanity from which it is almost impossible for him to get out. On the contrary, the man who has the moral courage to consider evil as evil and continues to struggle to rid the human brotherhood of it, he is an honest man of a very high stature. His existence is a blessing for humanity. Although such a person desires no recompense in this world, despite its inherent ingratitude, humanity will not fail to acknowledge that that servant of humanity is its true leader. This illustrates the words of Holy Quran that proclaim that the God-fearing and pious will be the inheritors of this world, and the words that declare them are, these are the triumphant ones. The importance of jihad in the scheme of civilization. After understanding the real meaning of jihad, it will be easy to gauge its importance in the lives of nations and its necessity in keeping the development of civilization on an even keel. Today, if there was a force of goodness that contained evil and struggled against oppression and transgression, that brought the oppressors to their knees before goodness, then the development of civilization would not have been so uneven and lopsided. In reality, today humanity is divided between oppressors and the oppressed, between masters and slaves. The moral, ethical, and spiritual destruction of the entire human civilization is at hand, somewhere due to enslavement and oppression and somewhere due to oppression and toleration. The willingness to resist wrong and bow its head down in acknowledgement of the right and the just is the hallmark of respect and dignity for any nation, let alone the defense of others against the forces of evil. If a nation is awake to the necessity of its own defense and is willing to sacrifice all, be it wealth, fame, luxury, or life itself in the cause, it would have earned respect in the community of nations. It is necessary that, even if actively championing the cause of others is not possible, it should be firm, at least, in the defense of its own right and justice for itself. If it fails to enforce even this minimum standard of justice, and if the spirit of sacrifice is at such low ebb, then when forces of evil attack it, instead of combating them or dying in the effort, it accepts a subservient existence. A life of disgrace would be its lot. Its life would definitely be worse than death. To make us understand the gravity of the situation, Allah in His Book of Wisdom has time and again mentioned of the nations, who in consideration of the price they may have had to pay, avoided jihad and ultimately accepted the dominance of the forces of evil. Such nations forever had become losers and non-achievers. Allah terms them as cruel. They had brought oppression upon themselves by their misdeeds. Indeed, they were destroyed by their own cruelty. At one place in the Quran it is stated, "Hath not the fame of those before them reached them, the folk of Noah, Ad, Thamud, the folk of Abraham, the dwellers of Madain, and the disasters which befell them? Messengers from Allah came to them with proofs of Allah's sovereignty. So Allah surely wronged them not, but they did wrong themselves. And the believers, men and women, are protecting friends, one to another. They enjoin the right and forbid the wrong." Al-Tawbah 70-71. In these verses Allah relates to us of nations who were victims of cruelty to themselves. He goes on to state that the qualities of believers are that they help each other and enjoin doing right and forbid wrong. The object here is to tell us that the nations long extinct had stopped imposing the right and noble way and opposing evil. This indeed was cruelty they did to themselves, which ultimately destroyed them. At another place, speaking of the cowardice of the children of Israel and their disinclination to fight in His cause and its dire consequences, Allah tells us of the time when Musa, having chastised them by saying that Allah had made them the keeper of the Holy Land, and instructs them to enter it and not to retreat, because those who show their backs achieve nothing. But the children of Israel, who were mortally in fear of the enemy, replied, "O Musa, lo, a giant people dwell therein, and lo, we go not until they go forth from thence. When they go forth, then we will enter not till then." Al-Ma'idah 22. Then two stalwarts of the children of Israel, who feared Allah and with whom Allah had been gracious, spoke out and tried to encourage them into entering the land, and promised them that victory would be theirs, if they but put their faith in Allah. But they ostentatiously replied, "O Musa, we shall never enter the land till they are in it. So go thou and thy Lord and fight. We will sit here." Al-Ma'idah 24. The Lord punished them for this cowardice, and they had wandered on the earth for 40 years, not finding a home anywhere. Their Lord said, "For this, the land will surely be forbidden them for 40 years, that they will wander in the earth, bewildered." Al-Ma'idah 26. At another place, Quran relates in detail the self-love and cowardice of the children of Israel, and their fear of death, because of which they were not ready to fight, and had to face the possibility of extermination. "Bethink thee, O Muhammad, of those of old, who went forth from their habitations in thousands. Bethink thee, O Muhammad, of those of old, who went forth from their habitations in thousands, fearing death. And Allah said unto them, Die. And then He brought them back to life. Lo, Allah is a Lord of kindness to mankind, but most of mankind give not thanks." Al-Baqarah 243. Later, the Muslims were given the instructions to fight, in very unambiguous words. "Fight in the way of Allah and know that Allah is Hero." Noah, Al-Baqarah 244. Later still, speaking of another group of the children of Israel, He says, "Bethink thee of the leaders of the children of Israel after Musa, how they said unto a prophet whom they had, Set up for us a king, and we will fight in the way of Allah. He said, Would you then refrain from fighting if fighting is prescribed for you? Yet, when we prescribed fighting for them, they turned away, all save a few of them. Allah is aware of evildoers." Al-Baqarah 246. There are many other examples like that of the children of Israel in Holy Quran, which explain the truth, that for the establishment of good, the most necessary is the readiness to defend it, whatever the sacrifice may be. The nation that loses this spirit will soon succumb to the forces of evil.